Our next speaker is Sally Dillon. Sally has been a candidate for us in the council elections. Ran a fantastic campaign in the seat of Cooperoo and went very close. Fell off her bike in the process and finished off the campaign with a broken limb and a cast, which I thought was really persistent and well done. But Sally is going to speak particularly from the perspective of being heavily involved in P&Cs in schools. So welcome, Sally.
And last time I was the extra when Larissa had an engagement was the time I fell off my bike. So I'm really pleased that I've made it here in one piece. Hello everyone, I'm Sally Dillon. I'm a mum, a seasoned volunteer, a community campaigner, and as you've heard, a Greens candidate at council level. I would also like to pay my respects to the Yagara and Turrbal people, and I really appreciated the welcome to country we had, because I think it's really important that to consider the role that education has in reconciliation, and all of us can learn more about the history that came before us. So I really appreciate that we had that this evening. So as Penny said, I am a P&C member. I am lucky enough to have 3 children at 3 different schools at the moment. I am on 3 different P&Cs. I've been president, vice president, fate coordinator, and numerous other roles. And I reckon in my time at school, which is now I think up to 13 years, I've probably raised $100,000 for my children's schools. Now, so I'd like to talk a little bit about fundraising. I don't know about you, there's a mixture of teachers and parents in the room, but one of the things an awful lot of parents got really excited about when the election was announced was not that we were about to finally have the election, but was that they were going to have a chance to run a democracy sausage sizzle. And schools regularly raise maybe at least $5,000 from a democracy sausage sizzle. I know that's the amount of money one of our local schools would expect to raise from running a fairly big booth. But the question for me is, why are they raising it? What's the money going towards? Now, for those, does anyone want to chip in with what their P&C might have raised money for at school? I'll tell you some of ours. We've raised money for benches to sit outside classrooms so that teachers can have breakout areas for learning for young children. We've raised money for trees so that children can have shady places to sit at lunch and to play during lunch. We've raised money to air condition the entire school because in southeast Queensland we have a lot of stuffy, badly built classrooms and the kids would just wilt and hot, tired kids can't learn. We raised money to put $10,000 worth of fans in the school hall. We raise money to keep a kitty for children who can't afford to pay for uniforms and books. I've got $20,000 worth of new instruments for the schools so that children can hire an instrument to learn music. And Buranda P&C, where my youngest still attends, also raises money to pay 50% of an environmental educator's teacher's wage. A teacher's wage. Now, often when we talk about fundraising at schools, it's talked about in the framework of it being the icing on the cake. Now, I'd like to suggest to you that those kind of things aren't icing, they're the ingredients. So why is it that parents are expected to devote countless hours to raise money to provide the basic ingredients for their children's education? Now, I can see a lot of nods, but just to put this into perspective, I wrote the numbers down. Last year, public school P&Cs, the ones that actually responded to the P&C Queensland fundraising survey, raised $86 million worth of money that went into providing our children with a free public education. That was raised with 873,000 volunteer hours. to provide the basics our children need for education. And that's not good enough. Schools should be provided with the funding they need to provide music, to provide environmental education, to provide cool classrooms, to provide resources to families that cannot afford to even buy a uniform by the government. It shouldn't be the families. And the other thing I want you to think about, and I know this as a fundraiser, is that schools in higher socioeconomic areas raise more money because their parents have more money to give. They're also invariably in better positions where they know how to fundraise and they know people. So inner city schools are very well resourced, both because they're better funded by the government and also because the parent body is able to raise more money. And that, to me, is not fair, and it's not just, and it's not what the public education system is meant to do. The other thing that you need to know is that as well as being able to apply for the infrastructure fund from the federal government, private schools also have enormous success in applying for grants. I'm going to give you an example of Churchy, and I hope I have these figures right, but I'm pretty sure it was $125,000 they got from Brisbane City Council for building a new playground. And the reason they got that money is because the playground's also open to the public. Now, no one goes there because it's in the back corner of the school on a little loop of the river on a little used path. But at the same time as they were getting that money, our school was raising $16,000 a year to pay for an environmental education teacher. The other thing our school was doing was raising money to fix all the defects in the hall that had been built out of the Rudd government's fund, the Building Education Revolution Fund, which paid for a lot of things like school halls after the GFC. Now, that hall was built on an extremely tight budget. It was a great idea, and everyone thought, fantastic, this is a really good thing. But there wasn't enough money to build the hall with opening windows, a hall in southeast Queensland. There also wasn't enough money to soundproof the school. So for every year after that hall was built, the P&C, the parents, have been paying to make it suitable for school use, and that's not good enough. So finally, I'd just like to quickly talk to you about my perspective as a parent with children at 3 schools. Primary schools, those of you who have kids at school today, mostly the resource fees are not even charged. It's up to the school whether they charge them. My children's school don't. We're lucky enough to have a uniform that we can buy at best and less, and they don't care if there's no branding. It's very easy. Not every primary school's like that. So when my child went to high school, I got severe budget shock. When I got the resource fee for $1,000 at the beginning, that's just per year. And then I had to go and buy the uniform, which, because the public school had chosen to have a felt hat and a $90 compulsory school bag, cost me another $1,000. $2,000 for my child to go to a free public high school. He's since changed school because we didn't like that school very much. His new school has managed to provide the same things for $450 and a cheaper uniform. My second child is going to a selective high school. It's a public school. He's very lucky that he managed to pass the exam to get in. But for him to go to that school, we had to take a loan from my parents-in-law. The first year he went, it was $5,000. There was a compulsory $1,600 laptop, more than $1,000 worth of uniforms, and $2,500 worth of school fees for a public school. So that literally broke us. You know, we borrowed money so that my child could go to this school. And every year since, it's a $2,500 fee. Thank God he hasn't grown much and we've now have a source of second-hand uniforms. But his textbooks are also $500 a year. The books he needs to learn are $500 a year. So that's not public education. I feel incredibly privileged to be able to actually even borrow the money from someone, but it is not fair that other kids cannot get this selective public education because their families can't pay those kind of fees. That's just outrageous. And that's why I am so delighted that the Greens will make public education truly free. Not just free, but we will make sure that the resource fees are covered, that schools can provide what they need to provide a good education without having to slug parents. We will make sure that there's an infrastructure fund. That means that P&Cs don't have to pay for fans for their school hall and don't have to pay for trees for the oval or for park benches so that the children can eat lunch. And we will make sure that living standards are raised and people will be able to pay for uniforms and they will be able to pay for books because they will have a high enough income, they will be able to put food on the table and their kids will be able to learn. So I would love to see people like Penny be elected, make that happen. At the election, it's not just about the democracy sausage sizzle, it is about making sure that our children can get a truly free public education. So please tell everyone you know about some of the statistics you heard tonight. If you didn't know about that infrastructure fund that went only to public schools, just tell 5 people about that tomorrow and tell them the Greens will change that. Thanks.
Thanks, Sally.